I thought my wife was working late, until I followed her one night and uncovered a secret that tore my world apart. What happened next changed everything, and it's a story you won't believe. I thought Sarah was just putting in extra hours at the office, until I found out where she really went. What followed shattered my world and led to a form of payback she never expected. My name's Eric. I'm 36, and for the last 8 years, I truly believed I had found my soulmate in Sarah. She's 34, intelligent, stunning, and the kind of person who can make you feel like you're the most important person in the world when she talks to you. That was what pulled me in back when we first met. She had this magnetic energy that made everything seem brighter when she was around. But now, that same charm feels like a weapon she's been using to keep me blind. These past few months, I've felt like I've been living in some sort of suspense thriller, except I'm the clueless protagonist who doesn't know how things will end. The odd part? It started so subtly, in such an ordinary way, that I didn't realize anything was wrong until I was knee-deep in doubt. It began with Sarah's attachment to her phone. Sure, she's always liked social media and texting her friends, but suddenly, it wasn't about funny memes or quick messages anymore. She'd glance at her screen, smile softly to herself, and the moment I asked what was so amusing, she'd lock her phone and slip it into her pocket like it was a state secret. At first, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Everyone deserves a bit of personal space, right? But then things started piling up. One night she came home after 11, claiming there had been some work crisis that needed her urgent attention. "Sorry, babe. My boss is useless without me," she said with that trademark smirk of hers, rolling her eyes for good measure. I believed her because it sounded so normal. I even joked about her being the office superhero. But that wasn't the only late night. Soon enough, coming home hours past dinner became a pattern. Then came the night she walked in smelling like a fragrance I didn't recognize, floral, rich, and nothing like the perfume she usually wore. I thought about asking her, but something stopped me. I didn't want to seem paranoid or insecure, so I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe it was a scent from work, or maybe she had tried a sample at a department store. But the uneasiness lingered. What really began to tip me off was her sudden change in behavior when it came to her friends. Sarah used to be open about where she was going and who she was seeing. She'd always tell me where they planned to meet and how long she'd be out. But now, she'd get these random calls late in the evening, step out onto the balcony to answer them, and return acting as if nothing happened. I brought it up once, asking casually who had called. She gave me a dismissive wave and said, "Just a colleague from work." "You're acting jumpy, Eric." Her laugh was light, almost teasing, but underneath it, something didn't feel right. It wasn't the laugh I knew. It felt hollow. By the time another week of late nights rolled around, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being lied to. But I still had no concrete proof, just this gnawing anxiety. Then, one evening, something happened that changed everything. Sarah had said she was working late again, but when I glanced out the window, I saw her car parked at the far end of our street. She wasn't heading to work. She was sitting there in the dark, talking on the phone. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but I watched as she laughed quietly, then rested her head against the steering wheel before driving off. It was such a small, random thing, yet it felt monumental. What was she doing? Why didn't she tell me she was just a block away? After that night, I couldn't keep ignoring my instincts. So, when she mentioned another work dinner the following week, I decided enough was enough. I waited until she left, gave her a few minutes head start, then followed her in my car. She drove across town, not to a restaurant, but to a rundown motel on the outskirts of the city. My heart sank as I parked a short distance away and watched her get out of the car. She looked around briefly before disappearing into one of the rooms. Every part of me wanted to rush over and demand answers, but instead, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. For nearly 2 hours, I stayed in that parking lot, running through every possible scenario in my head. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she was meeting someone for work. Maybe. But deep down, I knew those were just excuses to avoid facing the truth. When the motel room door finally opened, a man stepped out, a tall, sharply dressed guy who looked polished and confident, the kind of person who oozes control. He adjusted his collar, glanced around briefly, and started walking toward his car. Something inside me snapped. Without thinking, I opened my door and got out. "Hey," I called, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. The man turned to face me, eyebrows raised slightly, clearly trying to size me up. "Can I help you with something?" he asked, his tone calm and almost disinterested. "Yeah," he said, his voice light, casual, as if he hadn't just stepped out of a room where my wife, had been. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my tone even. "Sorry, I was just wondering. The woman you were with, who is she?" For a brief second, he looked caught off guard. Then, as if he'd caught onto some inside joke that I wasn't in on, he grinned, a smug, knowing look that made my stomach twist. "Oh, her. Just some girl for the night," he said with a shrug, as though it was the most ordinary thing in the world. "Goes by Amber or something. Didn't even get her real name. Why, you interested too?" He chuckled, pulling a small black card from his pocket and holding it out to me. "Here. She's good, man. Real good. Just don't go expecting any freebies." Without thinking, I reached out and took the card. It felt strange in my hand, cold and glossy like it didn't belong in my reality. My eyes locked on it, reading the simple text, Amber, followed by a phone number. No last name. No title. Just that name and number, printed in silver letters on a black background. He must have seen something in my expression, confusion, anger, or maybe just shock, because he gave me a quick, dismissive slap on the shoulder. "Good luck, man," he said with a smirk before heading to his car and driving off like none of it mattered, like I wasn't standing there in the middle of a crumbling world. I remained frozen in place, staring at the card as if it could explain everything, anything, that had just happened. Amber. A name that meant nothing to him but suddenly meant everything to me. My mind tried to connect the dots, but no matter how I turned it over, none of it made sense. He had called her a girl for the night. He didn't even know her real name. But I did. Her real name was Sarah. My wife. Eventually, I climbed back into my car, my hands trembling as they gripped the steering wheel. I sat there for a long time, replaying the scene over and over, trying to force some kind of logic into a situation that defied it. I wanted to toss that card out the window, let the wind carry it away and erase the past hour from my life. But I couldn't. My fingers clutched it tightly, as though letting go of it would mean losing whatever grip I still had on reality. When I finally drove home, I felt numb, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. I walked through the door in a daze, past the living room, and straight into the bathroom. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked broken. His eyes were hollow, dark circles forming beneath them. His expression was a mix of disbelief and quiet rage. I barely recognized him. I didn't know what I was going to do, but one thing was certain, this wasn't over. The rest of that night passed in silence, though I didn't sleep for a second. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind spiraling with questions I had no answers to. Who was that man? Why was Sarah with him? Was this some elaborate lie she'd been spinning for months, or longer? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, was Sarah really who I thought she was? Morning came too soon, and I still hadn't figured out what to do. All I knew was that I couldn't sit around pretending like nothing had happened. I needed answers. Sarah was still asleep, her breathing slow and steady. I watched her for a moment, trying to reconcile the woman lying peacefully beside me with the one I'd seen walk into that motel room last night. How could someone you've loved, trusted, shared your life with, suddenly seem like a stranger? Before she could wake up, I grabbed my keys and quietly slipped out of the house. I didn't have a concrete plan, just this burning need to know the truth. If I wanted to understand what was going on, I needed to start at the source. And that meant going to her office. I'd been to her workplace a handful of times before. Sarah worked at a marketing firm downtown, and I'd gone to a couple of their holiday parties with her in the past. Back then, she'd always had stories to tell, about her coworkers, funny client meetings, or quirky things that happened around the office. But in the last few months, all of that had stopped. If I asked about work, she'd give me vague, one-sentence answers or change the subject entirely. As I drove toward her office, I couldn't help but think back to those early days, when we used to talk about everything. I remembered how proud she was when she landed the job, how she'd come home excited after a successful pitch or a promotion. But now, it felt like her job had become a convenient excuse, a smokescreen to hide something I wasn't supposed to see. By the time I pulled up outside the building, my heart was pounding in my chest. The sleek glass facade gleamed in the morning sun, a stark contrast to the darkness I felt inside. I parked across the street and watched the entrance, waiting to catch a glimpse of Sarah, or anyone who could give me a clue about what was really going on. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I walked up to the reception desk, where a young woman sat, typing away on her keyboard. She noticed me approaching and offered a polite smile. I tried to steady my nerves, forcing my lips to curve into something that resembled a grin. "Hi," I began, trying to keep my voice casual. "I'm looking for Sarah Collins. Is she in today?" Her face brightened immediately. "Oh, Sarah. Yeah, I remember her. Such a sweetheart," she said warmly. But then her expression shifted slightly, as though something didn't quite add up. She tilted her head, giving me a puzzled look. "She doesn't work here anymore." Her words hit me like a cold gust of wind. I blinked, certain I hadn't heard her correctly. "What do you mean, she doesn't work here?" My voice was tighter now, each word more forced than the last. "She left a few months ago," the receptionist said, her tone still light, as if she hadn't just dropped a bomb on my world. "I think it was around 3 months back. She said something about moving on to a new opportunity, but I don't really know the details." 3 months ago. My heart started to pound, my throat suddenly dry. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't mention anything about quitting." The receptionist frowned slightly, as though sensing the weight of my reaction. "Yeah, I'm sure. We had a little farewell thing for her. It was kind of a surprise when she said she was leaving, but she seemed excited about what was next." I couldn't breathe. 3 months. For 3 whole months, Sarah had been leaving the house every day, pretending to go to a job she no longer had. Where had she been going? What had she been doing? My mind was spinning, trying to reconcile this new information with the woman I thought I knew. "Do you have any idea where she went? Did she say which company she joined?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "I'm sorry," she said, shaking her head. "She didn't mention it to me. But you could try asking someone from her old team in marketing. They might know more." I muttered a quick thank you, my legs barely carrying me out of the building. The cold morning air hit me as I stumbled toward a bench outside and sank onto it, my head in my hands. How had I missed this? How had I been so blind? For 3 months, I had believed her stories about work, the late nights, the stress, the deadlines. And every single one of them had been a lie. I thought back to all those evenings when she came home tired but pleased with herself, claiming she'd had a long day at the office. I remembered how I'd tried to support her, reassuring her that the hard work would pay off, that I was proud of her. All of it, every single moment, was a fabrication. And now, I didn't even know who Sarah was anymore. I needed answers, real answers. But where was I supposed to start? I couldn't just go home and act like nothing had changed. I didn't even know what normal was anymore. As I sat there, the weight of the last few days pressing down on me, my fingers drifted to the card still tucked in my pocket. Amber. That name felt heavier now, more sinister. I pulled out the card and stared at it again, the silver letters gleaming against the black background. For 2 days, I had avoided calling the number. I didn't want to know what I might find out. But after learning that Sarah hadn't even been going to work, I couldn't avoid it any longer. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. It rang twice before a calm, polished voice answered. "Hello, you've reached Amber's service line. How can I assist you today?" The voice was professional, almost pleasant, but it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't my wife. This was someone else entirely, a woman who sounded like she was running a high-end concierge service. I froze, my mind scrambling for something to say. Hi, I stammered. I'm trying to," my words faltered, and I cursed myself for sounding so unprepared. "I was wondering, what kind of services you, provide?" The woman didn't miss a beat. Her tone remained composed, patient, as if she dealt with nervous callers like me all the time. "Not to worry," she said smoothly. "We offer a range of personalized services. Private meetings, group events, or something more discreet, depending on your preferences." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. There was no mistaking what she was offering. This wasn't a misunderstanding or some innocent business. This was exactly what it sounded like, an escort service. I gripped the phone tighter, forcing myself to stay calm. I was hoping to, schedule a private meeting. Just a one-on-one. There was a brief pause on the other end, and I could hear the faint sound of typing. "Certainly," she replied. "And who would this meeting be for?" "Yourself?" "Yes," I said quickly, my voice uneven. "Understood. And would you like to request a specific companion, or should we select someone based on your preferences?" My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think. Amber," I blurted out. "I'd like to meet with Amber." There was a slight pause, then the woman's voice returned, still polite, still professional. "Of course. Let me check her availability. One moment, please." I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel with one hand and the phone with the other, trying to hold myself together. The walls of my life were crumbling around me, and I had no idea what I would find on the other side. But one thing was clear, I couldn't turn back now. The truth was waiting, and I was about to face it head-on. "Of course," the woman on the other end said, her tone unwavering and professional. "We can accommodate that. Please provide the preferred location, time, and day for the meeting." I could feel my pulse racing. I hadn't thought this far ahead, hadn't even considered what I would do after making the call. My mind scrambled for an answer, and before I could second-guess myself, I blurted out the name of a hotel downtown, the same one where Sarah and I had spent our anniversary 2 years ago. There was something darkly poetic about choosing that place. "Tomorrow evening," I added, my voice barely above a whisper. "At 8 p.m. "And would you prefer this to be a discreet arrangement?" she asked, her voice softening just enough to make the offer seem like more than a standard question. "We can ensure absolute privacy if that's what you require." Discreet. The word echoed in my mind, carrying a weight that made my stomach turn. Privacy. Shadows. Hiding. This was exactly what Sarah had been doing, slipping away into some other world, one where I didn't exist. But now, I was stepping into that world myself. "Yes," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "Discreet." "Understood," she replied without missing a beat. "I'll make the necessary arrangements." You'll receive a confirmation text shortly. Please let us know if there are any changes. Is there anything else I can assist you with? I wanted to say something, anything, to make this stop, to undo the last few minutes and pretend none of this was happening. But my lips refused to move. My mind was numb, and my body felt detached from reality. No, that's all. Thank you. Thank you for choosing our service, she said with a chilling finality. We look forward to your experience. The line went dead, but I kept the phone pressed to my ear, as if somehow holding on to that silence would keep me grounded. I stared at the black screen, struggling to process what I had just done. I had expected. I don't even know what I had expected. Maybe to hear Sarah's voice, to catch her off guard, to confront her and force the truth out into the open. But instead, I was left with more questions than ever. Who was this woman on the phone? What was this service? And why had it been so disturbingly easy to book a meeting, like I was ordering dinner or scheduling a haircut? The following day felt like walking through a fog. Time moved sluggishly, each hour dragging out longer than the last. I tried to distract myself, but nothing worked. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that dark hotel room, imagined Sarah walking through the door, imagined what I might say, what she might say. By the time evening rolled around, I was a bundle of nerves barely holding myself together. Around 5 p.m., Sarah came downstairs, dressed in a sleek black dress that clung to her figure in all the right ways. It was the kind of outfit she usually wore for special occasions, client dinners, office parties, or sometimes just a night out together. Her hair was neatly pinned up, and her makeup was done to perfection, like she was ready to charm the world. I sat at the kitchen counter, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. She breezed past me, pausing only to check her reflection in the mirror by the door. I'm heading out for a bit, she said casually, adjusting the strap of her handbag. I've got a work meeting. I watched her silently for a moment, taking in the way she said it so effortlessly, as if those words hadn't already lost all meaning. A work meeting? I echoed, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. It was almost laughable how easily the lie came out of her mouth. She nodded, barely glancing in my direction. Yeah, it's with an important client. I shouldn't be too late, but don't wait up, okay? She gave me a quick smile, the kind that usually disarmed me, made me forget whatever was bothering me. But not this time. I smirked in response, a small, bitter smile that I didn't bother hiding. It was the kind of smile that said, I know something you don't. She didn't seem to notice, too preoccupied with whatever script she'd rehearsed in her mind. Good, I said, leaning back in my chair. Hope it goes well. I emphasized the word good, letting it linger in the air just long enough to see if it would spark any reaction. For the briefest moment, she hesitated, her eyes flicking toward mine as if trying to gauge my mood. But then she shrugged it off, flashing that same confident smile. Thanks, babe, she said lightly, before turning on her heel and walking out the door. The sun had dipped below the horizon by the time I arrived at the hotel. The streets were quiet, and the building itself seemed almost too elegant, too serene for what I was about to do. My heart pounded in my chest as I parked the car and stepped out into the cool evening air. This was it. The moment everything would either make sense or shatter beyond repair. The lobby was calm, with only a handful of guests milling about. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact as I made my way to the elevator. Each step felt heavier than the last, the tension mounting with every passing second. When I reached the door of the room I had booked, I paused, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Do I really want to do this? A voice in my head screamed at me to turn around, to leave before I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. But it was too late for second thoughts. I needed answers, and this was the only way to get them. I took a deep breath, turned the knob, and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, a soft golden glow emanating from a single lamp in the corner. The scent of perfume hung in the air, faintly familiar, but with an edge that felt out of place. My senses were on high alert, every nerve in my body buzzing. And then, from the shadows, a voice called out, gentle yet teasing. "Come in, Marvel, and enjoy." The tone was calm, practiced, like someone who had done this 100 times before. My heart pounded in my chest as I closed the door behind me, stepping further into the room, toward the unknown. Her face twisted in confusion, her playful smile faltering as she tried to process what she was seeing. For a moment, she didn't move, just stared down at me, her mind racing to connect the dots. And then, it hit her. The recognition in her eyes was immediate, and all the color drained from her face, replaced by a deep crimson flush of shock and shame. "Eric," she whispered, her voice barely audible, trembling with disbelief. What are you doing here?" I didn't flinch. I kept my expression cold, devoid of any emotion. "Go on," I said, my voice low, biting. "Isn't this what you do during your work meetings? Don't stop now. I'm paying for your time, right?" Her composure crumbled completely. She scrambled off me, her hands trembling as she grabbed for her clothes, yanking them on hastily. Her eyes darted around the room, wild and panicked, like a trapped animal searching for an escape. "I can explain," she stammered, though it was clear she had no explanation worth offering. She knew, and I knew, there was nothing she could say to make this right. I didn't respond. I didn't try to stop her as she fumbled with the door handle, yanked it open, and bolted into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room, staring up at the ceiling as the chaos of the moment echoed in my mind. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't from adrenaline, it was from the hollow ache of betrayal, a pain so deep it felt like I couldn't breathe. She didn't come home that night. I didn't expect her to. After what I had just witnessed, I knew she had a lot more to hide. And this was only the beginning, I could feel it. Back home, I sat on the edge of the couch, staring down at the black business card that now felt heavier than ever. I turned it over in my hand, as if hoping it would offer some kind of clue to the mystery that had become my life. But it was just a card, plain and glossy, with nothing but a name and a number. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed. The line rang twice before the familiar smooth, professional voice answered. "Hello, you've reached Amber's service line. How can I assist you today?" I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to sound calm. "Yeah, I need to report an issue," I said, my tone cold and measured. "I paid for a service tonight, but your client ran out before anything even started. I didn't get what I paid for." There was a brief pause on the other end, as though the woman was processing the situation. When she spoke again, her tone was polite but firm, already shifting into damage control. "I'm terribly sorry to hear that, sir. That's not the level of service we strive to provide. Could you please provide the name of the client who was assigned to you?" I swallowed hard, feeling a bitter taste rise in my throat as I said the name. "Amber." "Understood," she replied smoothly, her voice calm but with a sharper edge now, as though she was making a mental note. "I assure you, sir, this will be addressed immediately. That particular client will be removed from our roster. We deeply apologize for the inconvenience." Her response left me stunned. Just like that, they were planning to cut her off, as if she were nothing more than a name on a list. It felt disturbingly transactional, like I wasn't dealing with real people but rather pieces on a chessboard that could be replaced at will. Before I could fully absorb what she'd said, she continued, "To make amends, we'd be happy to offer you another model tonight. Additionally, we can provide a 50% discount on your next appointment, should you choose to book with us again." Something inside me twisted at her words. This was all just business to them. But to me? It was my life unraveling in real time. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. "All right," I said, my voice icy. "But let's change the location. I want the service at my home this time." There was a slight pause, and I could sense the surprise in her silence. But she recovered quickly. "Of course, sir. That can be arranged. May I have the address, please?" I hesitated for a moment, my eyes scanning the familiar walls of the living room, the home Sarah and I had built together, now tainted by lies. But I gave her the address anyway, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I'll be here all evening." "Understood. Our model will arrive at the specified time. Is there anything else I can assist you with?" "No, that's all." I ended the call before she could say another word. The hours crawled by in agonizing silence. I couldn't sit still, pacing the living room while the weight of what I had done pressed down on me. I didn't know what I was hoping to achieve by going through with this. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I was still in control of something, even if it was this twisted charade. Maybe I just needed to see how far down the rabbit hole went. By 11 p.m., the doorbell rang, and my heart leapt into my throat. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before opening the door. Standing there was a woman, tall, poised, and impeccably dressed. She wasn't Sarah, but there was something about her demeanor that was eerily similar. She carried herself with the same calm confidence, her professional smile unwavering. "Good evening," she said softly, stepping inside with a grace that seemed practiced. "I'm here to take care of you tonight." I didn't say much. I led her to the bedroom, my mind a swirling mess of guilt, anger, and something I couldn't quite name. She moved with practiced ease, closing the door behind her, and began to undress. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching it happen from outside my own body. But just as things were reaching a peak, a sound stopped us both in our tracks, the unmistakable creak of the front door opening. My heart froze. No. She wasn't supposed to be here. She didn't come home last night, why now? Footsteps echoed down the hallway, slow and deliberate, growing louder with each passing second. Before I could react, the bedroom door burst open, and there she was. Sarah. Her eyes locked on mine, wide with shock, betrayal written all over her face. But for the first time, it wasn't me who was caught off guard, it was her. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide, her expression a tangled mess of confusion and horror. For a few agonizing seconds, she just stared, like her mind couldn't fully register what she was seeing. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The woman on top of me scrambled off, clearly startled, her confusion matching Sarah's, but I didn't move. I just sat there, watching, waiting for the storm to hit. "What the hell is this?" Sarah finally choked out, her voice trembling, a mix of fury and disbelief. "Eric, who is this? What are you doing?" I sat up slowly, pulling the sheet around me. My heart was pounding, but outwardly, I kept my composure cold and steady. I locked eyes with her, refusing to flinch under her gaze. "This?" I said, my voice low, deliberate. "This is someone who's finishing my order. After all, I paid for it. Isn't that what we do now?" Her face twisted, shock giving way to panic. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. Instead, she turned abruptly and ran, nearly tripping over herself as she fled down the hall. The door slammed behind her, the sound reverberating through the silence she left behind. The woman from the agency, still standing awkwardly beside the bed, glanced at me nervously. Should I go?" "Yeah," I muttered, barely looking at her as I waved her off. She gathered her things quickly, mumbling an apology before slipping out the door. And just like that, I was alone. Completely and utterly alone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I sat there in the dark, staring at the empty bed, letting the weight of everything sink in. My marriage, my trust, my sense of normalcy, everything had crumbled in an instant. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep living in this endless cycle of lies, hoping things would magically repair themselves. It was over. I called a lawyer as soon as their office opened. I went over everything, how I had caught Sarah sneaking around, how I'd discovered her secret life working for an escort agency, and all the little lies that had built up over time. I felt nauseous recounting it all, but my lawyer listened calmly, her tone professional but empathetic. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me. "This isn't just about infidelity, it's about deception and emotional harm. You have every right to protect yourself, and will ensure the court understands that." Filing for divorce was terrifying, but it also felt like lifting a heavy burden off my chest. It wasn't easy, I'd spent years building a life with Sarah. But that life had been built on trust, and once that trust was gone, there was nothing left to salvage. I had to take control of my life again, even if it meant starting over from scratch. When Sarah was served with the divorce papers, she tried calling me. Several times. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear her excuses or her apologies. I wasn't interested in whatever story she had prepared to justify her actions. Instead, I focused on the upcoming court hearing, preparing myself for what was sure to be a messy and emotional process. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. I walked into the courtroom with a quiet determination, ready to lay everything bare. Sarah was already there, sitting across from me, looking pale and exhausted. Her eyes were red and swollen, like she hadn't slept in days. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I saw something in her gaze, regret, maybe, or just fear. But I couldn't let myself care. Whatever she was feeling, it was too late. My lawyer presented the evidence with precision and clarity, phone records, testimony, and details from the escort agency. She didn't flinch as she laid it all out, but when she mentioned Sarah's involvement in illegal sex work, the courtroom grew eerily silent. "Your Honor," my lawyer said, her voice steady and clear, "this case is not just about marital betrayal. Mrs. Collins has been actively involved in illegal activity, engaging in paid encounters while deceiving her husband. This goes beyond infidelity, it's a complete violation of trust and the law." The judge's eyes narrowed slightly as he turned to Sarah's lawyer. "Is there any evidence to refute these claims?" Sarah's lawyer looked flustered, scrambling to put together a response. Sarah herself looked like she was about to break down. She opened her mouth to speak, but her lawyer quickly leaned in, whispering something urgent to her. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. I didn't say much during the hearing, there wasn't anything left to say. My lawyer handled everything with calm efficiency, while Sarah's side struggled to keep up. By the end of it, the judge ruled in my favor, granting the divorce. As Sarah left the courtroom, she didn't look at me. Her head was down, her shoulders slumped, as though the weight of everything had finally caught up to her. In the days that followed, I felt a strange sense of relief. Not joy, exactly, but something close to freedom. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in secrets and lies. I began the slow process of rebuilding my life, one step at a time. Then, a few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from an old friend. "Hey, Eric," he said, his tone cautious but curious. "Did you hear about that agency? The one Sarah was involved with?" My heart skipped a beat. "No. What happened?" "They got busted. The whole operation was shut down. Apparently, the police raided the place a few days ago. They're facing charges, looks like it's all over." I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't a happy smile, but one of quiet vindication. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my voice steady. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, letting it all sink in. The agency that had caused so much chaos in my life was gone, shut down for good. Sarah's secret world had collapsed, and now, she was left to face the wreckage. I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, I was free to start over, free to build a new life without the weight of her lies dragging me down. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I married Sarah, but it was the ending I needed. And as I looked out the window at the bright, clear sky, I knew one thing for certain: whatever came next, I was ready.